Hey guys, Megan here, the faithful fibromyalgia warrior, also known as Healing Foods Coach, also known to some of you as Mom, and to some of you simply Megan. So I hope you guys are having a great day. It's Tuesday, July the 2nd. It's a beautiful day here in Gravenhurst. You may hear in the background the sound of lawnmowers going. It's that time of year after all. Today's topic that I wanted to try to talk a bit about was the topic of mental health and mental well being, how I have struggled with mental health issues in the past, and how I found actual healing once I started on my journey to carnivore and while staying on carnivore. So I know that a lot of us probably, especially since COVID, there have been so many more people that have developed depression and anxiety. Some of us had it long before that, but for some of us, that's when it came, and that's when it came in full force. And some people, I'm going to talk about this too, also struggled with eating disorders. Now, what I've learned, at least with myself, is the anxiety, the depression, and the bulimia sort of have been feeding each other in an ongoing vicious cycle repeatedly. Let me just say that does not mean that just because you struggle with depression means you have anxiety or an eating disorder. And just because you have an eating disorder doesn't mean you struggle with necessarily depression. Nor does it mean if you struggle with anxiety that you also have depression and that you will end up, without any doubt, developing an eating disorder. However, they are very, very closely linked. Um, and in my case, when I finally got all of the processed, highly manufactured seed oils and added sugars and all the toxic plant chemicals in that were in my body out, that is when I noticed a lot of those things started to improve for me. And being is that a lot of these things happen to be a result of inflammation we carry in our brains. I mean, people, I have heard it said by many people, for example, those who suffer with, say, Alzheimer's, okay, or dementia. Often, these are people who have a lot of inflammation in their body and also in the brain. And that is from most especially a highly processed, um, consistently high carbohydrate and sugar diet. Okay, because those things, that's what feeds those things. Now, I'm not going to break down the science because I'm not the scientific expert. But what I can tell you is that, from my personal experience, um, this is definitely what was happening with me. Actually, just going back a step, there are many doctors and health professionals who often refer to Alzheimer's as type 3 diabetes. So you have the type 1, where you have no pancreas function or very little, okay? And therefore you don't have any insulin, just for those who don't know. Type 2, you have such consistent high levels of insulin that you become insulin resistant and your body goes the opposite direction. Type 3 is often what Alzheimer's is referred to. As you progress, you will get brain fog, you lose your ability to remember things, um, clarify specific details, etc. And actually, having also suffered with massive amounts of brain fog through fibromyalgia, that makes perfect sense. There's that chronic inflammation in the body and in the brain. Okay, so does that mean that you have to be chronically inflamed or have an autoimmune condition in order to suffer with anxiety, depression, or an eating disorder? No, of course you don't. Okay, I'm saying that if you do struggle with any of those things, I would think you are at significantly higher risk of developing an eating disorder. Okay. I suffered with bulimia for almost 30 years, for almost 30 years. And I did the usual thing that as a bulimic we do severe binging, followed by purging and extreme restricting. And when I noticed my weight would go up even half a pound, I panicked. So I was seen by a psychologist in 2012, and she determined that my particular, if you will, trifecta of emotions that seem to result in bulimia. She said the biggest cause for me of the bulimia in my case, she said, was because she diagnosed me, okay, with generalized anxiety and depression. Now, in my case, my anxiety was crippling. Anything that I had to face in my life outside of my immediate comfort zone caused my IBS to flare up. I would get bloated. I would have uh, constipation. I would have heart palpitations. I would start to get flushed. Like my rosacea would last over my face. I would be very red faced. And in my mind and in my head, I was constantly like, "Why is this happening? I can't do this. This is too much. How in the world am I going to resolve this? Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh!" And that was my automatic response. That fight or flight mode in me was extreme. Okay, and this was in 2012. I'd also struggled with depression for years. I refused to admit it. I refused to talk to anyone about it because, and perhaps it still is like this today, but in those days, especially as a fairly young wife and mother, I couldn't take the time to deal with it. If I just ignored it, I'll just push it away and push it down, and I'm fine. Everyone gets sad. It's okay. Everyone's sad. You know, finding out my older son had autism, that he would have ongoing challenges through his life, dealing with what we suspected at the time and found out later was ADHD in my younger son, and just trying to be in charge of everything, control everything under my own abilities and steam, knowing I had no way to actually deal with these things or make any significant changes, not trusting in God, certainly, and trying to rely on my own strength, even though I knew I didn't have the strength to rely on. So that was a constantly ongoing thing. I have had significant and crippling anxiety since I was a child. When we moved from Ottawa to Edmonton, um, I remember having nightmares like, oh my gosh, what if everyone, I had this recurring dream where everyone in my family got on a helicopter and flew somewhere really cool. But for some reason, I didn't go with them. I stayed in the house and I was supposed to wait for them to come back. Now, that would never have happened. Obviously, my parents would not have moved house without me because I was, at the time, obviously, I was 10, you know. But these were where my fears would dig in and they dictated my life. Simple things like um, I couldn't call if I worked in an admin in an office. And if someone asked me, okay, can you please call this customer and explain we can't do this, whatever the thing was, after all, I would panic. I would be stressed out. I would be finding reasons why I couldn't make the phone call. Could someone else please do it? I can't handle this. They're going to be mad. That was what was going on inside of me that whole time. Now, add to the fact that I didn't realize that the standard diet I was following was the sole cause of my IBS, my weight gain, my massive and unbelievable mood swings through my monthly cycles, particularly through pregnancy. That was a contributing factor, which I had no idea was the case. And I was always feeling like I'm not enough. I can't measure up. I'll never be good enough. But if I could somehow lose weight, I'll be better. I'll be okay. I'll be accepted, which I know to say now is ridiculous. But for those of you who've never struggled with an eating disorder, whether it was being anorexic or bulimic or something somewhere in between, because there's a wide range of other possibilities that have a very similar devastating effect on us psychologically and emotionally. Feeling as a teenager that I would be less than, worrying through my 20s, oh, what if I never meet someone? What if I never get married? Being married to a great man, having two beautiful children, thinking, oh, how can he possibly love me? I've put on 10 pounds. And I was always going from diet pills, diet powders, diet shakes, the latest, you know, restrict yourself to 200 calories a day and drop 20 pounds in a month. All the crazy things that, let's face it, most of us have tried and obviously failed at. I tried Weight Watchers. Um, I almost went and spent money to do Jenny Craig, but I couldn't get behind it. Okay. So imagine somebody who is panicking at the thought of putting on weight when I was already moderately overweight, especially after the kids. Okay. Thinking that the toast with peanut butter and the bananas and the oatmeal with brown sugar and cinnamon and bananas on top, that was healthy and that was going to get me where I needed to be. I did a brief experiment of being a vegetarian. And let me just say, there was a lot of gas involved, unfortunately, for those around me, just being honest. And on top of that, I was so hungry all the time, constantly hungry, constantly eating almonds and constantly eating cashews, peanuts, and all the things I was supposed to eat with the fiber and the plants and the stuff. And it made me feel worse and worse and worse. And I personally saw it as my fault that I failed. And that spun me into another anxiety ridden down spiral and panic attack. So move forward from 2012 to March of 2014, which is when I had one of my vertebrae in my lower back prolapsed. It sort of bulged out. Thankfully, it didn't come out all the way. Thankfully, I was not paralyzed and it didn't actually touch the nerve, but it was out enough that it was irritating the nerve and I couldn't stand up straight at all. Okay, I could hardly walk. I was in agony. And when I was finally diagnosed, a month or two later, waiting on MRIs and results, and finally seeing my GP who said, yes, your disc has bulged. Awesome. What does that mean? Well, stay away from the gym for now. Do some stretching. Don't do any heavy lifting. It should heal itself typically within 6 weeks. And my first and immediate thought at that announcement, that my very first thought was, oh my goodness, I can't work out at the gym. I'm going to get fat. I'm going to put on all kinds of weight. No one's going to love me. I'm going to be a failure. Holy crap. That was my immediate thought. Was my concern over the fact that I would put on weight because I couldn't work out at the gym. Not, oh wow, I've been injured. I need to be careful. It was that panic, that anxiety of, well, what if I do this? Now, at the time, I was probably around 150 pounds. I'm 5'5", so that is a bit on the heavier side. That would be, I think, classed as mildly to moderately overweight. Okay. And that was me eating a standard diet with far too many fruits, far too many processed carbohydrates, and yet severely restricting calories and or having massive binges and purges. And I often felt like, oh my gosh, I had toast with peanut butter, which is great, but I'm hungry. And you know what? I've been injured. I can't work out. Forget it. I might as well go out and have a brownie and a coffee with pumpkin spice in it and all the flavor shots and everything else. And that's what I did, which is crazy when I look back at it. But that's what I did. That was my comfort food. That was how I tried to cope without coping. And of course, ultimately, that did me no favors and simply made things far more exacerbated. And so for me, when I started to panic over the fact I could not exercise for at least 6 weeks, and as it would turn out, for at least 9 years, that panic had all of these things going through my mind. So not only am I eating all the stuff that kept my insulin consistently super high, which actually developed, I actually ended up with insulin resistance. I was metabolically extremely unhealthy. Had no idea back in 2014, of course. I figured I had all the answers. I knew what I was doing. It was going to eventually work. So go back to the usual restrict, restrict, restrict. I can't. I'm starving. I got to eat. Binge, binge, binge. Guilt, guilt, guilt. Purge, 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 and depression. And I was told when I saw the psychologist that that's why that was happening, but that I wasn't enough into the bulimia that they felt they needed to hospitalize me for treatment, and that I had to learn how to cope with it. Great. So now what? So what did I do? I just pretended like I didn't have a problem. I had times at the job I was working at the time. I spent a lot of my bathroom breaks or lunch breaks. I would binge on junk, and then I would be purging in the bathroom, just to be honest. And I pretended like it wasn't happening and that I was okay because I did not know how to cope at that point. And I was such an emotionally out of balance, crazy person. A lot of the time, I had I had no coping skills available to me at that point. I just kept the definition of insanity. I continued to do the same thing over and over and kept expecting a different result, even though I knew that that would not happen. That's what I did because I didn't know what else to try. So that got especially bad in 2014 after my back was injured. I couldn't bend over, I couldn't purge, okay, in the toilet like I would have normally. So I just kept freaking out. I continued to eat the crap. I pretended that it didn't bother me. I had more and more inflammation in my brain and in my body. And it is really a small surprise. It's no small surprise that I ended up triggering a full fibromyalgia flare up that would end up lasting me, honestly, well into 2021. And the reason I say that date is because by 2021, I was a year into Carnivore, and a lot of my inflammation was dramatically reduced. A lot, a lot of my um, brain fog was, well, my brain fog felt like it was almost completely gone. I was still feeling pain because I think there was a part of me that was still convinced the pain was happening. I hadn't quite removed all of the fibromyalgia um, inflammation. Okay. I was struggling still with my thyroid, with IBS, et cetera, et cetera. So I say that because there are people who can start carnivore and within 6 months they've reversed all their medical conditions, depending on how severe they were, how inflamed they were, and for how long. And for me, I was inflamed for decades, if I'm being perfectly honest, long before I was told I had fibromyalgia, long before it flared up in 2014. So I found out my disc had prolapsed in June of 2014. And by August of 2014, I was already experiencing severe fibromyalgia symptoms at that point already. I constantly looked like I was a few months pregnant. I was constantly bloated, constantly constipated. But of course, at this point, I didn't have the tools of understanding the benefits of an animal based diet. So I was still rinse, rinse, and repeat as far as what I was eating. The standard crappy diet, right? And I was so overwhelmed with anxiety. I was so filled with depression, like, oh my goodness, I have to limit how much work I can do. I was finding it more and more difficult to focus on my daily work tasks. I knew that I might have to eventually stop working. Um, I could no longer take care of the home or be the wife or the mom that I wanted to be. And unsurprisingly, like many people who suffer from autoimmune conditions and chronic pain and illness, I was devastated. I really started to struggle with pretty significant depression. Oh, I would say easily back in September, October of 2014, at least. My GP tried me on one kind of antidepressant. I think it was tramadol, which unfortunately made me sick to my stomach. So I stopped taking it. Hoped things would get better. Heading into 2015, they didn't get better. I went back and saw another GP who then put me on sertraline. And that actually did start to help. And I want to make it clear that I am not anti medications. Okay, I'm not. I was on sertraline um, for 8 years because I needed it at the time as I was healing and trying to get in a better place mentally, emotionally, and ultimately physically as well. So they are absolutely lifesavers for a lot of people, especially if you deal with much more significant conditions like schizophrenia or bipolar. You know, please, if you are taking medication for that, please don't just stop taking medication. They are beneficial and they can be helpful. I'm simply wanting to say that I was on sertraline, 200 milligrams a day, which I believe is the maximum typically allowed for that particular drug to help with my depression. And while it did level things out for me, okay, it unfortunately had no effect on my anxiety, in spite of the GP saying, yeah, it should help with anxiety too. It did not. And oftentimes I felt like a total zombie. So it was either feeling like my brain was a hamster wheel constantly on the go, with my emotions all over the place like a giant roller coaster, um, or level that out, but feel like I wasn't even like I felt a lot of the time like I was watching my life from outside my own body. I wasn't actually there. That's how I felt. Okay. That doesn't mean that's how it affects everyone, and some people do super well with it. And please don't feel embarrassed or ashamed if you feel like maybe you need to take some extra medication, because I also believe doctors, God created the doctors and some of those important medications for a reason. Okay. Now, at the time, I needed it because this was 2015. I was nowhere near a carnivore, keto, ketovore, lion, or low carb diet, like not remotely at all. And so I needed something to help me to not feel the depression. And while it didn't help with my anxiety, at least I was feeling a bit more positive about life for the time I was taking it. And I share that because sometimes we have paths we have to walk in order to get the destinations that we maybe couldn't see in our futures. Okay. So through all this, I'm still struggling with feeling uh, fat and horrible and ugly and guilty for eating the foods I enjoy, but without the ability to stop or change it. I didn't know what else to eat. Like I said, tried vegetarian briefly. My husband lasted a year. I think I lasted maybe 6 months, but that's being generous because I had to start having some eggs, which then became eggs and fish and chicken and occasionally bacon. So really, I wasn't vegetarian for very long. I needed the animal fats and proteins even back then. But in my own arrogance, I thought I've got this covered. I'm taking medication for the depression. I'm following the recommended diet that we're all supposed to follow, and so therefore I will eventually be fine. I'm only having treats. I'm having one cheat day a week. But when I was alone by myself with my thoughts, My anxiety was constantly revved. It was crippling. I often felt like I couldn't go anywhere, do anything, plan for anything because I might let people down. I might plan it wrong. I might um, look up information and have something wrong for somebody. And I was feeling extreme pressure to be good at my job, to stay calm, to not be emotional. And yet I was super emotional. And all of that while feeling unworthy, not deserving of love or uh, attention or kindness because I was putting on weight, which I know now is ridiculous. But in the throes of an eating disorder, those are some of the things that we are challenged with. When that finally did change was in 2020. You know, COVID hit. We ordered lots of takeaways. We ordered food out all the time. We would eat cakes and treats. And oh well, what if we get it? We could die. So might as well enjoy life while we can. Was our mindset. And that is when my anxiety ramped really far up. And I honestly looked easily like I was about 7 months pregnant. I was so bloated. I was carrying an extra 100 pounds on my body. I'm, I've been 125 pounds consistently for 4 years now. And I was at 225 pounds, which was far too much. A large part of that was fat, yes, excess body fat, but a great majority of that was all the water weight that was being stored as a result of my inflammation and continuously, chronically high insulin levels. And when May came around for that year, my husband and I looked at each other. He's always able to be very honest. And if I was to say, hey, babe, you know what? I think you've put on some weight. You maybe want to look after that. He can hear that and it doesn't upset him. He can hear that and go, yeah, you know what? You're right. I do need to take better care of my health. He can hear that stuff. I couldn't because it would just destroy me emotionally and psychologically. But I realized even then that I had to lose some weight. I had never weighed that much, not even through either of my two pregnancies did I put on that much weight. And I knew it wasn't healthy. And I knew that it was making all the aches and pains in my joints and my wrists and my fingers and my knees, especially in my lower back and my hips. I knew that it was making it that much worse. I knew it was. And I would have to lose the weight. But probably for the first time in my life, I wasn't willing to do any sort of binging or purging or restricting. I knew somehow there had to be another way, a better way. And, you know, my sister in law at the time, we had been video chatting. She had just finished going through a paleo approach that helped her lose, I think, 40 pounds or so. And she completely reversed her Hashimoto's. So we got the book as an ebook. I read it and we started following paleo. Now, as I've shared in other videos, although my husband did pretty well, I think he lost almost 13 pounds that first week. I gained 7. It was all about the legumes and the nuts and the soluble fiber and the dark leafy greens and fruit smoothie or juice, green smoothies, which were the worst absolute thing for me ever because I was already dealing with significant IBS. And I was so frustrated at that point. I'd spent throughout my life following various, fad diets and restricting and binging and purging and pills and powders and this magic shake is going to help you lose all this weight. And none of it worked. Like I said, I even did Weight Watchers for a while. None of it worked. The weight always came back, and I always ended up adding on more because I'd starved myself. And so, of course, once I got real food back, after, I might lose 2 pounds in a week and a half. Once I was back eating regular food, that was it. I put on weight as well as inflammation. I did not know that. I was so frustrated because here I was following this book thinking, well, why isn't it working? Why do I feel worse and worse and worse and worse? And a friend of ours at the time, he wasn't doing so much for intermittent fasting consciously as he was trying this approach of having specific windows for eating. And he was having success and he had lost weight. And so I remember thinking, well, okay, what's that about? And I looked it up. And I found a whole bunch of videos about timed eating or fasting mimicking diets. Also, referring to approaches like low carb and keto, ketovore, carnivore. I didn't know about line diet yet, but these were all coming up in YouTube video feeds. And I remembered my sister in law had been keto back in 2015, and it had really helped with her psoriasis and arthritis. And I thought, well, wait a minute, let me look into this. There's something to it. I found all kinds of videos by Dr. Jason Fung, which led me to videos by Dr. Ken Berry, and that was it. I was sold. And I'm like, I want to try this. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. As excited as I was about the concept of getting rid of the dark leafy greens and all the stuff that was causing me gut issues, I was afraid to start following a ketogenic diet. One, because you have to keep track of your macros, specifically your carbs, because you don't want to go beyond 20 total grams per day. So that I was worried could potentially lead me back into my calorie tracking madness during the worst of my eating disorder days. Okay, so I had to be very careful about that. The other thing about it was I was afraid to eat saturated fats. I was afraid to eat animal products. I was afraid to eat eggs and I was afraid to eat bacon and cheese because I was under the wrong impression that fat makes us fat. And so I had to really sort of have this little mantra to myself, please let this work, please let this work, please let me feel better, please let me feel better, please let me lose weight, please let this work. I'm going to trust the videos I've seen by Dr. Berry and others and trust that no, eggs and bacon and cheese are not what made me fat. And this will help. And I had to do that almost before every time I would eat, every day for the first week or so. Because again, there was still that anxiety in the background going, oh, if you eat this, you're going to get fat by eating good sources of fat. And of course, I didn't. I did lose weight. And I was still taking my antidepressants and actually carried on doing that until 2023 when I finally was able to wean myself off of them. And I've been completely medication free now for over a year. But starting that process of having to actually physically, like I'm talking to you guys in this video, say to myself, I have to trust it's going to work. It's got to work. This is my last ditch effort. This has got to work. And within the first week, I think I lost 7 pounds. And it finally dawned on me, oh my goodness, this could actually work. Let me keep doing this. And I saw more videos about how if we aren't able to tolerate plants, it's okay not to have them. If we have issues with lactose and dairy, that it's okay not to have those as well. And those are what inspired me to continue eating animal based. I tried a few times in the beginning to have things such as lots of asparagus and a little bit of broccoli. Well, actually, I stayed away from broccoli because I knew how bad it was for my IBS. I tried having avocado and asparagus. And what I came to quickly realize is that unfortunately, I do not tolerate even them. I love them and they're a great part of a keto diet. I can't handle them. Can't do it. Okay. And it was when I watched one of Dr. Berry's videos, basically saying that we have permission to not eat fruits and vegetables if we can't tolerate them. and that's okay. And we will still be healthy. And that sort of helped me feel like I don't have to feel guilty for not eating my fruits and veggies. In fact, I used to eat so much fruit that that brought me to the point of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So I cut those out. Once I stopped eating all plants, my weight loss and healing accelerated dramatically. Okay, dramatically. And I can't say, oh yeah, that's it. I was never anxious again. Over the next 4 years, I've never had anxiety. It's not true. I have. However, because I've gotten my brain back, my brain fog is lifted, my fibromyalgia is reversed, my IBS is under control, my thyroid functions beautifully now. Because all of those things are factors in my everyday life by eating carnivore, I don't have massive mood swings. I don't have crippling anxiety anymore. I can step back, take a moment, breathe, meditate, pray, and approach a problem or a challenge in my life. So, for example, when I flew here, um, flew out March the 4th, or March, sorry, June the 4th. Okay. There was supposed to be a flight that went from London Heathrow to Toronto with a stopover in Halifax in Nova Scotia. No problem. It's fine with me. I got a notice as soon as I arrived at the airport. By the way, the second leg of your flight, it's been canceled. Or actually, no, sorry. The that's not what. Sorry, my apologies. I confusing that with something else. The first part of my flight was going to be delayed by 2 hours, which would mean that I was going to miss my connecting flight, which was the only flight leaving that day to get me to Toronto, where I was supposed to be my husband. So normally I would have been freaking out, anxious, flushed, worried, stressed. I need coffee, I need sugar, right? To calm myself. But instead, I was like, okay, I'm going to go to customer service desk, explain the situation, and ask what to do. Because obviously they have a contingency plan when people cannot make their connecting flights due to delays or flight cancellations. So I won't be the only one with that problem. No worries. Let me go talk to someone at the help desk. Got to the airport. I was there extra early, and instead, they simply booked me on a flight that was direct. I got to the airport on time. We were delayed for other reasons, but by an hour. But I still got into Toronto only an hour later than I was supposed to. My husband and I met up. We joined our son. We saw my mother in law briefly, and then we had the next day together. No issues. As a sign that I was able now to cope. Why? Because I wasn't dealing with the inflammation caused by the carbs and the sugars and the processed crap racing through my brain, fueling my anxiety, feeding my depression, and then therefore triggering my bulimia. And I'm not gonna say that when you go carnivore, all of a sudden all your issues are going to reverse instantly because they may not. It depends how long you struggle with them, how much inflammation is in your body, how many things you need to heal from. Your body prioritizes and heals the key things that you need to heal from first. For me, it was physical healing. For me, it was getting rid of the brain fog, reversing my fibromyalgia, healing my gut, healing my IBS symptoms. Those were priorities for the body to heal first. And those took time, which is why, you know, the anxiety was not something I felt I was finally getting on top of until probably just over, almost a year ago. I We all have moments where we face things we've never faced before and we still feel anxious. But I was not feeling emotionally crippled by it anymore. I have moments where I can feel sad, like I'm here, my husband's back in England, I miss him, I can feel sad, but I'm not feeling unworthy and depressed like I used to. And as far as the bulimia, I've been able to actually just find such food freedom. In other words, I allow myself to eat when I'm hungry. If I'm hungry, I will eat whatever time of day, and that's okay. That's all good. If I'm not hungry, I don't eat. And so I'm not forcing myself to follow any certain pattern or routine other than eat till I'm satisfied and satiated and then go from there. And so a lot of the tracking and the calculating and the, well, if I eat this, I have to, how much do I have to exercise to burn it off? All that sort of stuff that is part and parcel of bulimia or an eating disorder is simply gone. It's, yeah, I would say when I am nourishing my body and eating like I should and looking after myself, it doesn't even rear its head. When I um, allow myself to focus too much on, oh, I have to look like this, or this person is this exercise guru, or they're hiking, 1,000 miles this summer. And there are other things where I might feel less than and like, oh my gosh, I'm guilty because I'm not doing that. When those feelings try to come up, though, I actually have a way to handle it. And sometimes it's eating a little piece, a little slice of some salted butter. That's it. I'm good. I'm not hungry. I feel awesome. Other times it might be eating an actual proper meal because I need to nourish this body to continue to heal and function optimally. But I don't feel the stress of that like I used to. And that would never have been possible for me if I had not gone carnivore, if I was not on an animal based diet, because everything else I used to eat simply caused massive inflammation and pain, but also it caused emotional upset and turmoil, mood swings and mood disorders, all kinds of stuff because of the constant inflammation that was in my brain and in my body. And so once I was able to get rid of that, I, I didn't necessarily notice it straight away. But as I stuck with it, I started to notice it more and more. Oh, this isn't making me feel as anxious as it once did. Or, oh, I can call this company up and ask for this or that. That doesn't cause me to have a panic stress attack like it used to. Oh, flight's been canceled. Okay, so we'll figure out what our options are. It's going to be fine, type of thing. Used to throw me for a complete loop. Now it's kind of like, well, this is annoying and frustrating. However, it'll work itself out. I'll figure out what we can do from here, type of situation. And so I know this is a much longer one, guys, but I felt like there's so much to say and share, um, especially with things when it comes to things like mental health and well being, because we all have our struggles, different things, different reasons, but we all have struggles. And so I hope somehow this has been helpful. That is my goal. I hope um, I hope this has been helpful. I hope if any of these things are things that you struggle with, that you would consider trying an animal based diet. Again, if you're on antidepressants or other types of um, medications, please keep taking them. Do not just suddenly stop taking them. They are playing an important part for you right now. You may reach a time where you get yourself physically healthy and you're not so inflamed and you don't have the brain fog and the emotional woo ups and downs. Perhaps you reach a point where reducing your medications or even possibly coming off them is a valid and good idea. But until that time, please keep taking them. Okay, they do play an important role, absolutely. And I am not saying otherwise. But I think it's important to think about the fact that what we eat plays an incredibly important role. And maybe, perhaps, we can reduce the symptoms or prevent some things from occurring if we look after our nutrition to begin with. You know, perhaps a lot of these things will not develop or not develop to the same extremity if our nutrition is one that is non-inflammatory and healing. So whether that is a low carbohydrate diet, whether that is a keto diet, a ketovore diet, a carnivore diet, or the lion diet, whichever category in that rainbow of options you fall into, um, it can definitely help and it can definitely heal. Thank you guys so much for sticking with me all the way to the end. I always appreciate your love and support and kind words. And I hope that you guys have a fantastic day, whatever you get up to or whatever you've been up to. And I will see you guys in the next video, probably tomorrow, with more content. Bye, guys. Talk to you then. See you soon.